When it was designed and built, USS Thresher was the most advanced attack submarine of its time. It was faster, with the exception of USS Skipjack, and quieter than any submarine ever built, and able to dive deeper than any submarine in the world. Thresher was considered to have the most advanced weapon system of its day, created specifically to seek out and destroy Soviet submarines. Its new sonar was able to detect other submarines and ships at greater range, and was intended to launch the U.S. Navy's newest anti-submarine missile, Subrock. Thresher was to be the lead boat of her class of nuclear-powered attack submarines. It was laid down May 28, 1958, by the Portsmouth's Navy shipyard and launched July 9, 1960, with Miss Frederick B. Ward as her sponsor. Thresher was commissioned August 3, 1961, with Commander Dean W. Axeen in command. During its 1 year of trial operations from August 1961 to July 1962, Thresher fulfilled every expectation as the most advanced nuclear attack submarine in the world. As the lead vessel, the class name should have been the Thresher class, but tragedy laid in the submarine's future. Accompanied with the Penguin-class submarine rescue ship Skylark, Thresher put to sea April 10, 1963, for deep diving exercises. In addition to her 16 officers and 96 enlisted men, the submarine carried 17 civilian technicians to observe her performance during the deep diving tests. 15 minutes after reaching her assigned test depth, the submarine communicated with Skylark by underwater telephone. They were experiencing difficulties. Garbled transmissions indicated that far below the surface, things were going wrong. At 0913, listeners in Skylark heard a noise like air rushing into an air tank, then silence. At 0918, the chilling sounds of a submarine breaking apart and imploding were heard. Skylark continued to try to communicate with Thresher until well after 1700 with no reply. Efforts to re-establish contact with Thresher failed, and a search group was formed in an attempt to locate the submarine.
Well, as I say, I was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Naval Shipyard up there, putting the Abraham Lincoln in commission, and they was building the Thresher at the same time. So we shared the same barracks up there with the single crew, and I knew quite a few of the guys by association, having beers in the pump room, was a local bar on the station. And a couple of the guys I knew, the fire controlman there, Bronner Johnson, I knew for quite some time, and most of the fire controlmen I knew on there was one young kid, the second class Senate. I went to A school with him, so I spent a year associated with him. And how I become really closely associated was when the day that Thresher went down, I was on an airplane coming back from Key West, Florida, with Admiral Ramage and the staff. We had just done a material inspection of the tenders. And so we was in the air, and all of a sudden we got a message saying we was going to land at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. And so they took the Admiral off. And we never knew what happened until the next morning when I read the paper there in the London Day that it lost Thresher.
Thresher was officially declared lost April 11, 1963. Deep-sea photography, recovered artifacts, and an evaluation of her design and operational history permitted a court of inquiry to conclude Thresher had probably suffered the failure of a saltwater piping system joint, which relied heavily on silver brazing instead of welding. Earlier tests using ultrasound equipment found potential problems with about 14% of their tested brazed joints, most of which were determined not to pose a risk significant enough to require repair.
Most of the stuff that I read, of course we all get very interested in what's going on riding submarines. We really like to know what happened, and of course it was after that they had the sub-safe program started, and I guess the Flasher was the first one that they put a lot of, went through sub-safe reconstruction. And from what I gathered, that they had a valve or line that carried away in the engine room, flooding the engine room, and there was at test depth. And so they got a reactor scram which lost all power, so even with the backup propulsion, with electric propulsion, they wasn't able to take and get control of the boat, the weight of it, and so it just went down.
High pressure water spraying from a broken pipe joint may have shorted out one of the many electrical panels, causing a shutdown of the reactor, with a subsequent loss of propulsion. The inability to blow the ballast tanks was later attributed to excessive moisture in the sub's high-pressure air flasks, moisture which froze and plugged the flask flow paths while passing through the valves. Without the reactor, the sub would not have had enough power to stop itself from sinking to the bottom. In accordance with naval tradition, her class was subsequently named after the second ship in the series, the USS Permit. USS Thresher was stricken from the Navy list, and the name Thresher will never again be assigned to a military vessel.
So we started this exhibit 2 years ago. So it's been 2 years of work to write the exhibit, design the exhibit, get the funding for the exhibit, and then print and install the exhibit. I think we want the public to know what happened to Thresher and to know these positive things that came out of the accident. Thresher is always talked about in the same breath as the phrase, never forget. Don't forget what happened to Thresher, not only because of the people that were on her, but we learned some very valuable lessons from Thresher. And it's not an option to be in a situation where we need to relearn those lessons. It's important to remember them so they never happen again.